The Mughal Empire, a name that evokes visions of marble palaces and opulent courts, often presents itself as a beacon of stability and grandeur. Yet beneath this surface lies a complex web of ambition, betrayal, and fragile alliances. The very architecture of the empire, designed to project authority and unity, belies a deeper, more tumultuous reality, one where the throne, rather than being a symbol of enduring power, became a stage for relentless contestation. This chapter delves into the intricate dynamics that defined the Mughal succession, revealing a historical landscape marred by the very loyalties that were meant to uphold it. As the warm light of dawn spilled into the grand halls of the Red Fort in Agra, it illuminated not just the intricate inlay of precious stones, but also the faces of men hardened by the weight of ambition. The air was thick with the scent of sandalwood and incense, yet the atmosphere crackled with a tension that belied the outward tranquility. The Mughal Empire's governance hinged on personal loyalty, an arrangement that appeared noble but often devolved into a breeding ground for discord. It was a system reliant upon the whims of individual rulers and their relationships with courtiers. Loyalty was not merely a virtue, but a currency exchanged in the political marketplace. In this environment, the bonds of family were both a sanctuary and a source of peril, weaving a tapestry of alliances that could fray at the slightest provocation. At the heart of this intricate dance of power lay the position of the emperor himself. For all his might, a ruler like Akbar, often lauded for his visionary policies and religious tolerance, knew that his authority was precarious, maintained only through the loyalty of those surrounding him. His court was a vibrant spectacle, filled with art and scholarship, yet the laughter that echoed against the marble walls often masked the cold calculations of men vying for favor. Akbar's own approach to governance, his deliberation in matters of succession, was shaped by a deep understanding of the fragility that underpinned his rule. He sought to foster loyalty through diplomatic marriages and strategic alliances, yet the very measures meant to secure stability laid the groundwork for future strife. As the Mughal Empire expanded, so did the ambitions of its princes. The sons of emperors grew up in the shadow of their fathers' legacies, each one molded by the lessons of history and the palpable tension of court life. The glittering courts, filled with celebratory feasts and intellectual discourse, also served as the arenas of manipulation and betrayal. Each princely heir was acutely aware that the bond of blood could shift from a source of support to a weapon in the chaotic struggle for power. The echoes of rivalry were seldom silenced, often rising to a fevered pitch amidst the trappings of grandeur. The notion of stability was further complicated by the sheer scale of the empire itself. Spanning vast territories from the Deccan Plateau to the Punjab, the Mughal domain was culturally and ethnically diverse. This complexity added layers of difficulty to governance. The emperor's writ, while powerful, was often contested by local chieftains and regional governors, many of whom held substantial military resources and personal followings. In the silence of their fortresses, these men plotted, their ambitions simmering just beneath the surface, awaiting the moment to assert themselves. The empire, while unified under the Mughal banner, was often a mosaic of competing loyalties and grievances. As succession disputes arose, the language of loyalty became intertwined with that of violence. The grand narratives of Mughal history often gloss over the bloodshed that accompanied the transition of power. Each emperor's death could trigger a cacophony of ambition, drawing brothers and cousins into conflict, their relationships strained by the promise of the throne. This struggle was not merely a battle of swords, but a contest of intellect and strategy, where the manipulation of alliances and the crafting of narratives played crucial roles. The walls of the Red Fort, which had witnessed the rise of empires, now bore witness to the tragic unraveling of families torn apart by the very desire for stability that had once bound them together. Consider the fateful narrative of Aurangzeb, whose ascent to the throne was marked by a culmination of familial betrayal and political maneuvering. His rise was not simply the product of ambition. It was the result of a meticulously crafted strategy, one that required sacrificing relationships that once seemed unbreakable. The echoes of his brother Dara Shikoh's execution reverberated throughout the empire, a grim reminder of the lengths to which successors would go to secure their power. For Aurangzeb, the throne was not merely a position of authority, it was a crucible of ambition, where the fires of conflict would ultimately consume the very stability he sought to maintain. As the decades unfolded, the Mughal Empire's veneer of stability cracked under the weight of internal strife, leading to the rise of a narrative that would be bequeathed to future generations, a tale of unity overshadowed by the relentless pursuit of power. The dynastic conflicts, often romanticized or simplified in modern retellings, were fraught with complex motivations and consequences that shaped the trajectory of the empire. The underlying tensions that simmered beneath the surface were devices of historical causality, each decision echoing through time with reverberations that would influence the destinies of millions. Through the fabric of personal loyalties frayed by ambition, the Mughal Empire emerged not as a singular entity, but as a constellation of aspirations, alliances, and conflicts. The intertwining threads of succession disputes, familial love, and betrayal painted a portrait of an empire in which stability was but an illusion, one that would eventually lead to its fragmentation. The beauty of its architecture and the richness of its culture were but fleeting shadows against the backdrop of a tumultuous history, where the very essence of power was defined not by unity, but by the relentless quest for dominance. In the annals of history, the Mughal Empire stands as a testament to the paradox of stability achieved through an intricate dance of loyalty and power, revealing that beneath the resplendent surface, the true heart of the empire beat to the rhythm of ambition and conflict. It is within this interplay that the story of the Mughal legacy unfolds, chronicling not just the rise and fall of rulers, but the enduring human struggle for identity, belonging, and supremacy.
As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the vast expanse of the Mughal Empire, the court of Agra buzzed with a tension that pulsed through its marble halls. The air was heavy with the scent of incense and the whispers of courtiers, who navigated the sharp edges of ambition and the loyalty that once bound brothers, now fraying at the seams. Here, the grandeur of the empire was matched only by the ferocity of its familial rivalries, a duality that would shape its very fate. Among the swirling silks and the clang of jeweled daggers, Aurangzeb emerged from the shadows, a figure defined not merely by his lineage, but by an unyielding will to power that ignited the ambition of those around him. Born into a dynasty that had reached its zenith under his father, Shah Jahan, Aurangzeb's rise was not solely a matter of birthright. It was a calculated maneuver through the treacherous waters of princely ambition. The imperial court was a living entity, one that thrived on loyalty and betrayal, love and envy. Aurangzeb found himself amid his brothers, each vying for a throne that shimmered like a tantalizing mirage, promising glory yet cloaked in peril. Dara Shikoh, the favored son, stood as a foil to Aurangzeb, embodying a vision of the empire that embraced tolerance and spiritual enlightenment. The two brothers, once close in their youth, now stood on opposite shores of a widening chasm, their differing ambitions threatening to redefine the very essence of Mughal rule. As Aurangzeb observed his brother from the corner of a bustling courtyard, he felt the weight of their father's gaze upon them, a silent reminder of the expectations that loomed over the princes. The sun's rays caught the jewels embedded in Dara's turban, glinting with an almost mocking brilliance as he entertained a small gathering of artists and philosophers. In contrast, Aurangzeb's darker garb felt like armor, a stark reminder of the resolve to wrest control from those who indulged in the dream of a softer empire. He understood that the delicate balance of familial affection was not a foundation upon which to build an empire. It was a facade, a brittle surface that could shatter under the slightest pressure. With each passing day, the growing distance between them became palpable, a silence echoing louder than the words left unspoken. The palace walls, once a sanctuary of shared laughter and dreams, bore witness to the cultivation of ambition and the slow unraveling of brotherhood. Aurangzeb's mind turned over strategies, alliances, and the small acts of subterfuge that would secure his place in history. The raucous celebrations of his brothers became a backdrop against which he plotted, the laughter of their feasts twisting into an unsettling reminder that his own path lay shrouded in secrecy and sacrifice. The brothers would meet in the grand hall adorned with intricate frescoes depicting the triumphs of their ancestors, each encounter laced with a tension that simmered just beneath the surface. They greeted one another with courteous smiles, yet behind those gestures lay a profound understanding. Only one could emerge victorious from this internal struggle for the crown. The winter of 1657 brought the first true fracture among the brothers as their father fell gravely ill, the once dominant Shah Jahan now reduced to a shadow of the emperor he had been. The news spread like wildfire through the empire's expanse, igniting a fierce urgency among the princes. Dara Shikoh, confident in his father's affection, sought to restore the empire's glory through unity and peace, believing that compassion would guide their father back to health. Meanwhile, Aurangzeb, emboldened by ambition, saw the moment as an opportunity to seize control. A series of clandestine alliances began to form, whispers of loyalty twisted into conspiracies that would soon fracture the very fabric of their family. The court became a chessboard, and Aurangzeb, the ruthless strategist, began to maneuver his pieces with calculated precision. He reached out to their younger brother, Murad, whose youthful exuberance and desire for recognition made him susceptible to Aurangzeb's persuasive words. Together, they concocted plans that extended far beyond the walls of the palace, aiming not just for the throne, but for the very soul of the empire. In this conspiracy, the sanctity of brotherhood eroded further, the bonds that had once united them now chains of deceit and betrayal. The fragrance of jasmine and sandalwood that had perfumed their childhood memories now turned acrid in the air, each rivaling glee draped in the stench of ambition. The inevitable confrontation arrived with the rippling sound of steel against steel. The very sound echoed the decisions that had led them there. The clash of arms was not just physical, but symbolic, a manifestation of the frayed bonds that could no longer withstand the weight of desire and ambition. As Aurangzeb faced Dara, time stretched thin, each heartbeat a reminder of the irrevocable choices that formed a tapestry of rivalry woven through with blood and betrayal. The grand hall, once a stage for their shared dreams, now bore witness to the culmination of their ambitions, an arena where the stakes were nothing less than the future of the empire. In that charged atmosphere,
Aurangzeb grappled not only with his brother, but with the ghosts of their childhood, the laughter that had once danced in the air, now replaced by the grim resolve of men who understood that power was not given, it was taken. The consequences of their ambitions would not merely resonate within the walls of their palace, but would echo throughout the empire, shaping its destiny for generations to come. As the last echoes of clashing swords faded into silence, the brothers stood as fractured reflections of a grandeur lost, their legacies forever altered by the pursuits that had driven them apart. In the aftermath of their conflict, the empire would find itself at a crossroads, each brother left to reckon with the consequences of their choices, a family splintered, an empire echoing with the lessons of ambition and the price of rivalry. The Mughal Empire, once a unified force of art and culture, began to fracture further, the very foundations laid by their ancestors now threatened by the ambition that had ignited their hearts. The weight of the crown, heavy with the legacy of their forebears, would now rest upon Aurangzeb's brow, yet it would bear the scars of betrayal and the haunting realization that the pursuit of power could irrevocably shatter the bonds of blood. As he looked out over his empire, now defined not just by conquests, but by the fractures that separated him from those he once loved, Aurangzeb understood that the ambition to rule came with a cost that would linger long after the battles were won.
The air was thick with tension as the Mughal Empire teetered on the precipice of civil war, the grand tapestry of power now frayed at the seams. In the heart of this uncertainty lay the question of succession, a matter as fraught with ambition as it was laden with familial ties. The death of Aurangzeb in 1707 had stripped the empire of its central authority, leaving behind a legacy of fractured loyalties and smoldering resentments among his heirs. As they eyed each other across the vastness of the imperial court, each prince bore the weight of their lineage, a burden that both unified and divided them in equal measure. The echoes of their father's reign reverberated through the hallowed halls of power, where the scent of sandalwood mingled with the bitterness of betrayal. Among the contenders, the eldest son, Muazzam, soon to be known as Bahadur Shah I, sought to consolidate his claim. He moved through the imperial city of Delhi with a sense of both determination and trepidation, navigating the bustling bazaars as the murmurs of discontent filled the air. The path to the throne was not merely a matter of birthright, it demanded alliances forged in both blood and treachery. His journey was fraught with the knowledge that each step taken was a step deeper into a web of political intrigue spun by the very family he sought to unite. The clash of swords and the cries of the wounded would soon echo in the valley of his ambitions, but for now, the silence was oppressive, punctuated only by the distant sounds of hawkers peddling their wares, oblivious to the storm brewing within the imperial fold. As the princes began to mobilize their respective factions, the first significant clash erupted at the Battle of Jajal in 1707, a confrontation marked not just by the ferocity of combat, but by the personal stakes that tethered the warriors to the field. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the battleground, where the ground was pocked with the remnants of conflict, and the scent of gunpowder mingled with the earth's own musk. Muazzam's forces faced off against the loyalists of his brother, Azam Shah, a man whose ambition was rivaled only by his fierce sense of loyalty to the legacy of their father. The landscape, once a symbol of opulence and grandeur, transformed into a theater of despair as soldiers, driven by a heady mix of devotion and desperation, clashed violently. In the chaos of battle, the air was thick with cries of valor and despair, a cacophony that enveloped the combatants.
The battlefield became a crucible where ambition wrestled with mortality. Each swing of the sword, each cry of a dying man echoed the irreversible choices made long before the first arrow was loosed. The outcome of Jajao would not only determine the immediate victor, but would forever alter the balance of power within the empire. As the dust settled and the wounded were tended to, the grim tally of lives lost became a somber reminder of the stakes involved. The throne had become a tomb, and with each life extinguished, the empire's foundations trembled. The personal toll of such violence spilled into the very fabric of Mughal society. Families were torn apart, loyalties frayed, and the once splendid courtly life descended into a maelstrom of distrust. The loss was palpable in every corner of the empire. Wives mourned husbands who fought for a cause they scarcely understood. Children were orphaned by the machinations of power-hungry men. As Muazzam returned to Delhi, the burden of leadership weighed heavily upon him. His victories, though hard-won, were accompanied by a gnawing apprehension. What kind of emperor would he be, ruling over a realm splintered by bloodshed? The subsequent clashes further underscored the fragility of power. The Battle of Agra in 1708 proved disastrous for Muazzam, a reminder that in war, even the most calculated strategies could unravel under the pressure of human fallibility. The city, once a jewel of the empire, bore witness to the anguish of its people as flames engulfed homes and cries of despair became the backdrop of a new reality. Ambition turned to desperation as the shifting tides of allegiance proved treacherous. A once loyal general defected, lured by the promises of Azam Shah, who saw an opportunity to reclaim his fractured claim to the throne. Each betrayal deepened the scars upon the empire, the cost of ambition now measured in blood and sorrow. Amid the chaos, the personal stakes of the princes grew ever more entangled with the political landscape. The ruthless calculus of strategy dictated their actions, yet the lingering bonds of brotherhood haunted their every decision. As Muazzam sat in his tent, weary from the ceaseless conflict, he grappled with the ghosts of his past, a father who demanded loyalty above all, and a mother whose love had been overshadowed by the shadows of ambition. Each encounter with Azam became not merely a clash of arms, but a visceral confrontation with the ties that bound them, the echoes of their childhood laughter now drowned beneath the din of warfare. The final clash at the Battle of Samugarh in 1709 would become the fulcrum upon which the fate of the empire turned. The landscape was littered with the debris of conflict, a silent testament to the ambition that had consumed both brothers. As Muazzam faced Azam, the strains of their shared past hung heavily in the air, a poignant reminder that ambition could weave a web of destruction that ensnared not only the individual, but the empire as a whole. The cries of their soldiers became indistinguishable from their own as they wielded their swords, each blow a desperate attempt to reshape a future that felt irrevocably lost. With Muazzam's ultimate victory came not only the throne, but also an overwhelming sense of hollow triumph. The empire lay in ruins, its splendor marred by the scars of civil war. As the dust settled, the implications of their struggle reverberated through the court and beyond, a reminder that the path to power was paved not just with ambition, but with profound loss. The fragile peace that followed would be but a temporary reprieve, for the consequences of warfare had woven a new tapestry of power dynamics that threatened even the most established foundations of Mughal rule. In the heart of this turmoil, the question remained: what kind of legacy would emerge from the ashes of such conflict? The empire, once a symbol of unity, now lay exposed, vulnerable to the ambitions of those who would follow, all too aware that the struggle for supremacy was far from over.
The Mughal Empire,
once a paragon of grandeur and opulence, now languished under the weight of its own ambitions and internal discord. As the sun dipped below the horizon of the Deccan Plateau, the vivid hues of twilight painted the skies, seemingly mocking the empire's declining fortunes. The echoes of past victories, grand military parades, the melodic chime of courtly laughter, the lavish feasts held in honor of illustrious generals faded into whispers, drowned out by the strife that now consumed the very heart of Mughal authority. The imperial throne, once a symbol of unassailable power, had transformed into a perilous seat, attracting not only ambitious heirs, but also a host of opportunists, each willing to spill blood in the pursuit of their visions. In the years following the death of Aurangzeb, a succession of wars for power erupted among his descendants, laying bare the fissures within the empire. The ensuing violence did not merely reshape the political landscape, it eroded the foundational tenets of loyalty and trust that had once characterized Mughal rule. The once proud nobility, reduced to quarreling factions, began to see alliances as fleeting shadows, their loyalty as insubstantial as the wisp of incense smoke mingling with the heavy air of a crowded court. Each skirmish, each ambush became emblematic of desperation, driving a wedge between the throne and its subjects. The vastness of the empire, once a source of strength, now became a vulnerability, a sprawling expanse that invited division rather than unity. In the imperial palaces, the atmosphere grew thick with a palpable tension. Conspiratorial whispers slithered through the marbled halls, where once the soft laughter of courtiers had danced on the air. Now, behind the ornately carved doors, scheming princes convened, their eyes alight with ambition, their hearts heavy with the knowledge that each plot could end in betrayal or bloodshed. The gilded ceilings loomed overhead, majestic but oppressive, a poignant reminder of the empire's former glory. As the flickering oil lamps cast wavering shadows, the very essence of authority hung tenuously in the balance, as fragile as the delicate glasswork that adorned the chambers of power. Among the key players in this unfolding drama was Prince Muhi-ul-Mulk, a man shaped by the harsh realities of his upbringing. Unlike his forebears who had wielded power with strategic finesse, Muhi-ul-Mulk's ambition was visceral, born from a childhood spent navigating the dangerous waters of royal politics. His heart raced with the intoxicating blend of fear and desire as he surveyed the landscape of his ambitions. The empire had become a chessboard, each piece marked by the blood of fallen rivals. He understood all too well that in this game, the player who hesitated was often the one who fell, crushed beneath the weight of others' ambitions. The specter of failure haunted him, compelling him to act swiftly, to strike before he himself was struck down. The internal strife unfurling within the Mughal court did not remain contained to its gilded walls. As the blood of princes stained the earth, ripples of unrest spread through the provinces, where local chieftains seized the opportunity to assert their dominance. The once loyal zamindars who had sworn fealty to the crown now found themselves wrestling with the twin forces of ambition and survival. The Mughal Empire's peripheries began to fray, leading to a vacuum where new powers emerged, their aspirations fueled by the chaos that swirled like a storm over the empire's heart. Among these emergent forces was the Maratha Confederacy, a coalition rising defiantly against the remnants of Mughal rule. Their leaders, charismatic and fiercely proud, tacked into the discontent that simmered among the peasantry and the warriors alike.
The smell of gunpowder and the clang of steel resonated in the valleys as Maratha armies forged ahead, emboldened by the perception that the Mughal Empire was a relic of the past, unable to defend itself against the rising tide of nationalism and local ambition. With each skirmish, with each territory claimed, the Marathas not only expanded their reach, they also further dismantled the perception of Mughal invincibility, ushering in an era where the flag of the empire, once revered, became an emblem of decline. As these internal fractures widened, external threats began to loom ominously over the empire. European powers, observers, and sometimes participants in the unfolding drama saw an opportunity amidst the imperial decay. The British East India Company, cloaked in the guise of commerce, began to extend its tentacles into the vast reaches of India, ready to exploit the empire's vulnerabilities. The merchants, bolstered by their trading privileges, transformed into political players, their interests increasingly aligning with local factions vying for power. In this crucible of ambition and desperation, the Mughal authority found itself besieged, not solely by rival factions within its territory, but also by foreign entities poised to capitalize on the chaos. The legacy of the Mughal Empire, a tapestry rich with the threads of culture, art, and architectural wonders, now appeared threadbare, fraying at the edges. The opulent courts that had once celebrated the fusion of Persian, Indian, and Islamic influences became overshadowed by the reality of political impotence. Artists, once patrons of royal households, found themselves grappling with the dualities of survival and identity in a rapidly transforming landscape. The vibrant colors of Mughal miniatures began to pale, reflecting the waning power of the empire they depicted. Each brushstroke, each intricate detail seemed to mourn the inevitability of change, of a legacy that was slowly shifting into the annals of history. Amidst this maelstrom, the bond between ruler and subject unraveled, a poignant reminder of how the scale of authority can buckle under its own ambitions. The distance between the opulent palaces of the emperors and the dusty paths of the villages became insurmountable, a chasm filled with resentment and disillusionment. The once unquestioned loyalty of the populace eroded, leaving a dangerous void, one that was quickly filled by the allure of new leaders promising change, stability, and a fresh beginning. As the sun set on the empire that had once cast a long shadow across the Indian subcontinent, the legacy of the Mughal dynasty transformed from a tale of greatness into one of caution. The internal strife that once signaled a battle of supremacy now laid the groundwork for a new age, one marked by the rise of local powers and the inexorable advance of colonial interests. The echoes of ambition, both noble and nefarious, mingled in the air, forever altering the trajectory of a civilization that had once stood at the forefront of the world.
In the wake of the Mughal succession wars, a silence enveloped the vast territories that once thrummed with the vibrancy of imperial confidence and authority. The grand palaces of Delhi, where the air was thick with the scents of sandalwood and spices, were now mere echoes of their former glory. The marble inlays of the once bustling courts reflected the sun's muted rays, illuminating the cracks in both stone and governance that would forever alter the socio-political landscape of South Asia. The succession conflicts, marked by betrayals and bloodshed, did not merely dissolve the bonds of kinship, but instead they splintered the very fabric of Mughal power, leading to an era of instability that would resonate through generations. As the dust settled over battle-scarred fields and the clamor of swords quieted, a profound sense of unease took root among the populace. The fragmentation of power, with its attendant ambition and betrayal, catalyzed cultural shifts that rippled across the subcontinent. Regional leaders, emboldened by the chaos left in the wake of imperial fragmentation, asserted their dominance, each carving out spheres of influence in what had become a disjointed political landscape. In many ways, the Mughal Empire, the very symbol of unity and cultural synthesis, began to dissolve into a mosaic of princely states, each marked by its distinct customs, languages, and traditions. This decentralization, while initially a product of conflict, fostered a renaissance of regional identities. Artisans and scholars, no longer bound to a singular imperial narrative, began to flourish in local courts, cultivating a rich tapestry of cultural expression unseen in the preceding era. Yet this burst of creativity was steeped in a complex interplay of fear and ambition. As regional rulers sought to consolidate their power, they often resorted to the manipulation of cultural symbols, appropriating Mughal grandeur while simultaneously seeking to distance themselves from the imperial legacy that had betrayed them. The poetry of the time bore witness to this duality. Verses once celebrating imperial ideals transformed into lamentations for a lost unity. The ghazals and folk songs of the era echoed with a longing for stability, resonating with the psyche of a populace grappling with both nostalgia and the pressing need for adaptation. The streets of cities like Lahore and Agra, previously bustling with merchants and scholars, now bore witness to a new order, where local leaders vied for loyalty and legitimacy, often through the very cultural expressions that had once celebrated a shared Mughal identity. As the socio-political framework shifted, so too did the mechanisms of governance. Where once the emperor's word was law, now regional chieftains and nobles carved governance into their own image, often prioritizing personal loyalty over merit. Intrigued by the consequences of these shifts, many local lords began to establish their own codes of law, reflecting the intricacies of their own diverse constituencies. This reformation of governance was not without its turmoil. The absence of an overarching imperial authority led to skirmishes and territorial disputes, with the very essence of loyalty now dictated by familial ties rather than allegiance to a faraway throne. In this emerging landscape, many families found themselves divided by allegiances, caught in a web of conflicting loyalties that would shape their fates for generations to come. The psychological landscape of this era was marked by a pervasive atmosphere of uncertainty and ambition. Noble families, once secure in their positions, now operated under the specter of betrayal, aware that power could shift with the turn of a word or the flash of a blade. Within these dynasties, individuals were forced to navigate the treacherous waters of loyalty and ambition. A son might find himself plotting against his father in the hopes of seizing control, while a brother could be compelled to take up arms against his own kin, illustrating the stark reality that loyalty was often a currency too easily exchanged in the quest for power. Such internal conflicts imbued the age with an emotional weight, where familial bonds became both a source of strength and a potential harbinger of ruin. The legacy of the Mughal succession wars thus emerged as a cautionary tale, reminding the people of South Asia that power, while intoxicating, was also ephemeral. The cultural renaissance birthed from fragmentation offered a vibrant landscape in which local traditions could flourish, but it also carved deep fissures in the societal structure. As communities began to see themselves through the lens of regional identities, the once cohesive Mughal narrative fragmented, offering a kaleidoscope of stories that reflected the complexities of human ambition, tribal loyalty, and the inevitable consequences of conflict. The tapestry of South Asian history was being rewoven as the colors of local pride mingled with the darker tones of betrayal and loss.
Through this intricate danse macabre, the citizens of South Asia learned to adapt, survive, and even thrive amid chaos. New alliances formed in the shadow of past grievances, and the echoes of the succession wars rendered themselves palpable not just in the courts of power, but in the fields, marketplaces, and homes across the subcontinent. The descendants of once mighty Mughal nobility, now rendered mere players in a larger game, witnessed the transformation of their legacy as the ideals of loyalty and power found themselves interwoven with the stark realities of survival. As the fires of ambition flickered in the hearts of regional leaders, a new chapter of governance emerged, characterized by an understanding that the wounds of betrayal run deep and the lessons of the past echo through the corridors of time. The fragmented empire forged a new reality in South Asia, wherein the lessons of familial loyalty became intertwined with the complex fabric of cultural identity and governance. The repercussions of the succession wars would continue to be felt long after the last sword was sheathed, shaping the contours of power and ambition that would define the region for centuries to come. In this sense, the legacy of the Mughal Empire, now rendered into a multitude of narratives, stands as both a testament to the fragility of power and a reminder of the intricate dance between loyalty and ambition that continues to define the human experience.